Like a couple of notable people before him, Willie Brown was targeted by activists with pies. Brenda Burdett has the story.
There's been a rash of this lately. Prominent faces getting slapped with pies. Is it funny? A political statement? Or a physical assault?
Those responsible for the not-so-sweet surprises are members of the Biotic Baking Brigade, also called the BBB, a self-proclaimed activist group fighting a number of problems, including downtown development, cutting of the redwoods, and homelessness.
Pie is an example that you don't have to you don't have to revere somebody just because they're more powerful than you. Like, just because someone is very wealthy or very powerful does not mean they're untouchable. You know, they're just a man or a woman, just like the rest of us are just a man or a woman. And like pie is the great equalizer. You know, how wealthy and powerful are you with pie dripping off your face?
Milton Friedman is the intellectual architect of neoliberalism, or you might call him the sort of ideological godfather of neoliberalism. And neoliberalism is an economic theory that liberates corporate power from any kind of state control. And that means neoliberalism justifies corporate plunder of the environment, corporate poisoning and exploitation of consumers, and corporate, exploitation and spiritual and physical mutilation of workers. And that's what neoliberalism is really all about, fundamentally.
Particular brand of economics further allows multinational corporations to rape the land, to plunder the social systems that we have, to prevent any type of popular resistance to occur.
So even though Milton Friedman might seem like a strange target, like just some fuddy-duddy old geek, the man is like a purveyor of an ideological poison that is central to the kinds of policies and politics that are threatening the health of the planet and threatening the interests of common people all over the planet.
And that's why our targets have been, biotechnology, clear-cutting the redwoods, corporate crime, neoliberal economics in the case of Milton Friedman. So, again, the common thread through all of our targets is the unaccountability of corporations and people who are sympathetic to corporations.
And the pie in the face brings attention to your cause.
Very much so.
That's the bottom line. Tom from San Francisco, join us here.
Across town, Governor Pete Wilson was a guest speaker at a conference on school choice and corporate America. Wilson was hosted by the Milton and Rose D. Friedman Foundation, whose founder believes corporations and education are a good match.
In the privatized future fantasized by Milton Friedman, no one gets a student loan, and no one but the super elite go to college, and no worker has a union, and no one gets a subsidized loan from the government. And we're seeing that movements towards that here in the U.S. We're having public education, right? A fundamental, a really minimal concession to working people is being undone with like Channel One and the Edison Company, these sort of corporations moving in to take this infrastructure that the people essentially have built with their tax money and to give it over to private corporations who will then, make a profit off it and flood young children's minds with like really grotesque, free market ideology. That's the privatized future that Milton Friedman fantasizes.
These management corporations see themselves as Kentucky Fried Chicken or Home Depot, and they want to provide fast food education to kids.
sourdough to hot
I've always wanted to meet you because I've admired you for years. I've studied your books. I went to Cal, that's
Well, we won't hold that too much again.
Mr. Friedman, it's high.
Oh my goodness.
Hey,
Well, they are at it again.
When Robert Shapiro was pied, he had just given a speech, a bone-chilling speech about the state of the world, saying that, there's no such thing as sustainable agriculture anymore, there's no such thing as sustainable technology, and the only hope for the planet and the only hope for the food supply is genetic engineering. I mean, just terrible stuff. And he'd finished his speech and he was arguing with someone who was, saying shame to him for all the bad things Monsanto has done, and he was approached and a pie was put in his face and he stepped back and was like, I hope you're proud of yourself. I hope you're really proud of yourself, and then wiped the pie off and went back to his argument.
This is nothing new. These genetic engineered crops, they're not being invented from the blue. They're not something, a magician who pulls out something from the air. This is tampering around with nature which has existed, a technology which had been looked after and nurtured by farmers in the South. Today you're stealing it from them and then you're giving it back to them as expensive seeds which they have to buy every year, after taking away the valuable resource of nature from them, saying that we are fancy, savvy, sophisticated scientists who have created it in the labs. It is not very different from East India Company that came to India, took away the natural resources, made garments in England and made Indians buy it then. Never mind, the resource came from India. So, what people like Vandana Shiva and others have called it, it's colonization once all over again for the third world.
We have not yet identified, let alone cloned, the gene for wisdom. And some skepticism about our ability to manage powerful new technologies is appropriate. It avoids the sin of hubris and helps us operate within our limitations as humans.
Are we really going to believe a company like Monsanto and others? I mean, Monsanto, what it has given to us in the past? It gave us Roundup. Not many of us are familiar with it. It's a nasty, nasty pesticide that it gave to us. How many of us know of Agent Orange? As our Marines have come back affected by Agent Orange from wars, they gave put their life on the line for the country. What did the country give to them? The gift of Monsanto, Agent Orange. So we're going to trust somebody like that when it's not willing to give us information, when it's going to give us seeds, something as natural, as beautiful as which gives us seeds each year. Destroy the source.
It is really an evil plan because they've converted a chemical company's commitment to a single product. After all, Roundup is the most profitable pesticide ever sold in the world, and it is Monsanto's single largest seller. So why not make all the seeds in the United States tolerant to this herbicide so that when people spritz or take airplanes and fly over, all the weeds will fall asunder and left behind will be standing straight the soybean plant that Monsanto created.
People are concerned about Monsanto that it's gaining monopoly. I don't think Monsanto is like the Microsoft. It is a Pinochet of the food world. And that's what I told Robert Shapiro. You shouldn't be concerned about being labeled as Microsoft and the monopoly and the rest. You're the Pinochet of the food world. And I say that because it's not just about information that is being provided or not being provided to consumers in terms of how safe the technology is, how safe everything is. The issue is the tactics that they've adopted in terms of suppressing people's opinion or anyone who's tried to say anything about it.
I think that people, to use an example, people like Robert Shapiro, they very rarely put themselves in a place where they're going to hear any dissent. The event that he was pied at was the State of the World Forum, which is a bunch of self-congratulatory, wealthy liberals patting each other on the back. Nobody there is going to be saying, you know, you're wrong, what you're doing is wrong, what you're doing is dangerous and frightening and bad. Like, people aren't going to get close enough to him to say stuff like that. So they very rarely hear any of that dissent. It goes through, like, you know, his secretaries, his underlings before it would ever get to him. And so getting a pie in the face is, first of all, like I say, it's a message of we know who you are and we don't agree with what you're doing. And it's also, like, it puts a face on that dissent. Like, here's this person and they're willing to come right up to you and put the pie in your face. Like, we really don't like what you're doing.
And I believe that the state of the world in the next century will be more hopeful for more people as a result of the wise application of biological knowledge. Thank you very much.
They can poke fun at society and the rulers and the world. And a very interesting clown is the Hopi clown, the Hopi Pueblo. If you're familiar with that clown, it's called the tsuku, or the kosher, and they wear black and white stripes and they have corn braids. And they would be a perfect mirror of everything of the Hopi world. So they did everything that was un-Hopi. And the only rule that they had to follow was that they could break every rule.
Thank you. The American public understands the impact and the message that is put forth by a pie. I mean, think of Three Stooges, think of the Marx Brothers. It's very, very plain what is happening when a pie is delivered.
Pieing is part of our culture. Pieing, it's used in the circus by clowns, and even Johnny Carson used to get pied all the time as part of the shtick, and many.
I think the history of pie throwing shows that it's a form of visual Esperanto. It's a universal language. Everyone understands the pie in the face. And in fact, the headline of the Examiner after the recent elections was, GOP receives pie in the face. There you have it.
There's the metaphor. Well, here.
Popular as this jest has always been, however, it cannot compare with the ribald connotations associated with the dispatch of an edible missile. First, the simple, straightforward, offensive deposit.
In your face! Charlie Hurwitz, in your face! Milton Friedman, there's poetic justice dripping from your chin. In your face! Bob Shapiro, in your face! They're the people's heroes, and you're just a notch upon their rolling pin. Yes, you're just a notch upon their rolling pin.
We're pie-throwing anarchists. I mean, we don't believe in relying on the mainstream media for much of anything, but, you know, there's the possibility of as the situationists would have referred to it, of détournement. To détourn is to alter the spectacle that, you know, for instance, mainstream media presents, and to take their spectacle and just spin it around.
The three main TV networks are owned by Disney, by Westinghouse, and by General Electric. So we have the same corporations that are destroying us through nuclear energy and nuclear warfare, through infotainment, which creates a set of values that are completely opposed to any kind of sustainable, any kind of peaceable process. So we have the situation where the same corporations that are destroying us and destroying our future are presenting us with the news.
All right. I'll make sure they get it to you. Wonderful. Talk to you soon. This is Agent Salmonberry, like the fish. You got it. All right.
You know, their use of the internet has been such that there are right-wing think tanks like the RAND Corporation that regularly publish reports documenting the fact that the Zapatistas, more than perhaps any other uprising in modern times, have effectively bypassed the regular filters, the regular circuits through which veins of dissent are cast aside and never get to the people themselves.
It is part of a bigger challenge that has faced every recent mayor, and now it's Willie Brown's turn.
Like a couple of notable people before him, Willie Brown was targeted by activists with pies.
Well, one of the ways that this helps the homeless is that people are aware that one of the reasons that the pieing of Mayor Brown happened was to bring attention to what we've called the Great Homeless Sweep. There are new programs being put into effect as we speak, called San Francisco Cares and a 3 Drunks and You're Out program, which are designed to sweep homeless people off the street.
If anything, the article on the front page of the New York Times makes it very clear that the programs that Mayor Brown and his administration have outlined are not addressing the needs. They're pouring money into Mission Rock facility, and that facility is going to be turned down. There are 7 people for every 1 bed in this city, and there are 1,700 people being turned away every month from beds.
Thank you for calling the Great Sweep Hotline. This message will repeat in Cantonese and Spanish. The next Great Sweep is Saturday, November 7th.
154 people died on the streets of San Francisco last winter.
I'm
Who's
very well
accountable
aware
for
of
that? You know, we're in a crisis time, and
so when are we going to change the laws to address that? You know, how many pies need to be thrown before we're going to change the laws?
yeah, I guess we'll see.
Brown says he hopes to have groundbreaking for the new stadium when the Giants move to their new stadium in the year 2000.
And just as the mayor was getting all warmed up and ready to make that rather dramatic announcement, he got a surprise today, one that left him momentarily speechless and stone-faced. Like a couple of notable people before him, Willie Brown was targeted by activists with pies. Brenda Burdett has the story.
Hey, you gotta be quiet for a second. This was called, of course, to announce the Great Sweep and to kick off the Great Sweep. But this morning we have something even more dramatic to talk about, and that's the San Francisco...
Those responsible for the not-so-sweet surprises are members of the Biotic Baking Brigade, also called the BBB, a self-proclaimed activist group fighting a number of problems, including downtown development, cutting of the redwoods, and homelessness.
That allows people to have a laugh at the expense of rich and powerful and otherwise unaccountable figures.
The kinds of pies used are different for each person and carry a special significance. For example, the all-American symbol apple pie was used for Charles Hurwitz, the CEO of Pacific Lumber, because the organization feels cutting the redwoods is un-American.
So far, 5 notable people in business and politics have been hit, and the BBB plans to pie many more.
Well, the brigade was formed in the summer of 1997 to deliver our delicious mischief to Charles Hurwitz, the CEO of Maxam Corporation, parent company of Pacific Lumber, which is cutting down the Headwaters Forest. Since then, it's grown into a network, and we understand that there is a vast number of militant bakers, both here in the city as well as up north in the Headwaters Forest. I couldn't estimate numbers, but we understand that there are many people who feel like there are many folks who need their just desserts, and we know how to dish it up.
But I would add to that that the only thing that's necessary to be a member of the Biotic Baking Brigade is a pie and a vision of a better world.
It's also an act of violence. Someone is hurt. The mayor's limping. People are upset. There's melee after the incidents. And also the police chief of San Francisco is threatening to prosecute.
Well, first of all, I've read in the paper now that he first had a bruise in his stomach, then his knee, now his ankle. He made 20 public appearances that day. I have some doubts about this alleged injury. Furthermore, you know, a great many people found it terribly funny, and also it's an unusual approach that we take, and we think it's quite effective, actually.
The difference in reaction between the people on the street and the people in the halls of power has been extreme.
There's no misdemeanor. It is a felony. And I hope that we will stop the laughing now. The fun is over. The joke should stop.
Particularly in the situation with the pieing of Willie Brown in San Francisco, it's really clarified a lot of those class issues. Is when you have people saying, you know, this is terrible. This is a crisis of incivility, I think is what Amos Brown said. You know, and just blowing this up into a huge thing, but all the people who are treating this like it's a great crisis, like a very, very serious issue, are the people in power, are people who, you know, who have influence and who have a lot to lose if people no longer respect that influence. But on the other hand, the people who are living on the streets or living a paycheck away from the streets, they're laughing their asses off.
And who knows what was in that attaché case? Right there to the podium. Laid it down with the pies in it. It should never be the case that persons would be permitted to get that close to our mayor in public functions such as was on Saturday. Mayor Brown could have fallen back, and the fall would not have been broken, and he could have suffered a brain concussion.
This is a serious matter. We're talking about high crimes and misdemeanors.
Monday, between sessions in court, they were back on the street. Was it worth it?
Well, it's hard to put it in terms like that. Obviously, I didn't expect anything like broken bones as a result of pieing.
Rahula Janowski claims a friend of the mayor broke her shoulder after she tossed her pie.
Where is the justice when Garland Rosario grabs a woman, puts his knee in her back, I'm referring to Rahula Janowski, reaches up under her arms and pulls her back? That's a kill move.
So basically the bottom line in San Francisco is if you're wearing a uniform, a police uniform, or if you're wearing a suit and you work in City Hall, you can commit crimes against homeless people, poor people, and people of color. And you will not be prosecuted, you will not be jailed. Whereas if you are a political activist and you serve free food to hungry people like in Food Not Bombs, or throw a pie in somebody's face who can't take a joke, you're actually beaten, you're actually arrested, you're incarcerated, and you're forced to go to trial.
Your reaction to the sentence?
I'm shocked and rather appalled, although unfortunately not necessarily completely surprised given what we faced here. 6 months says that this is the absolute, positively worst battery that could ever happen. It's way disproportionate, completely disproportionate to what is appropriate in this case.
The point is not like, us being on trial necessarily for throwing a pie. The point is, there are a lot of people dying on the streets of the city, and it needs to be dealt with.
For sentencing, but they said today, don't be surprised if we see more pie-throwing incidents at public officials. In fact, as one member of the Biotic Baking Brigade said today, there is a pastry uprising going on not just in this country, but all around the world. Reporting live in San Francisco.
Well, they are at it again. The group of activists who pied Mayor Willie Brown attacked Chevron CEO outside a San Francisco school today. And members of the Biotic Baking Brigade videotaped the attack at Galileo High. These are their pictures. So what is behind this very public campaign? ABC 7's Don Sanchez joins us from the scene of today's attack with the story. Don?
Well, okay, as you said, indeed, it's the Biotic Brigade once again, and the pie throwers were videotaping at Galileo High School here in the marina. This time the target, the Chevron CEO, Kenneth Derr. Derr was here to give a speech, actually. He was going to give a speech when he was pelted by 4 pie-wielding activists. They claim they were targeting him for what they say is Chevron's alleged involvement in the murders of rebels in Nigeria. The pie throwers then ran away. Derr went on inside. School officials say the pie throwers were not students, and I can confirm they are part of that same group that pied Mayor Willie Brown. I talked to one of the pie throwers.
As long as our political and corporate leaders are willing to lie, we are willing to pie.
My friend Joe Alberti, he said, "Hey, man," he said, "those guys throwing pies." And I looked around, I seen pie all over the execs, pumpkin pie and blueberry pie. And then the guys took off running, and there was 2 cameramen with them. So it was like it was a big setup, you know. I said, "Man, look at all that good pie."
All 4 of them are being sought on battery charges. The 3rd member of the Biotic Baking Brigade who pied Mayor Willie Brown went to jail today. All 3 of them serving 6 months. But they tell me, Salmonberry tells me, Agent Salmonberry, that that's not going to deter any of the activists. In fact, they're going to spread their pie throwing worldwide. Live in San Francisco, Don Sanchez, ABC 7 News.
Our next caller, I think, is one of your colleagues, Sal Decker. It's a man who calls himself Agent Warcry. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
A woman, excuse me, named Agent Warcry.
That's correct. I am a woman. You know, Foucault said, disturb the spectacle. And I'd just like to say about Milton Friedman, one of the people we pied. He was one of Reagan's closest economic advisors, and those top-down neoliberal approaches have resulted in a great deal of misery and decimation of people's lives, especially in the 80s. Milton Friedman was also one of Pinochet's advisors in his administration on economic policies, and Pinochet, as you know, is a mass murderer. Where is the accountability in that? Where is the accountability when Charles Hurwitz rapes the ancient pristine forests of Northern California and the state rewards him for it? Wealth has perverted our political process and our society, let's face it, and the media has failed to do its job, and we're forced to resort to these tactics to have any voice, whatever, on these critical issues. And this is the first thing that's eased my sense of despair at the futility of social activism, which is so often just dismissed and ignored.
Well, you got your voice in this morning, and I'm glad you did. I thank you for the call. Let me get Robert's.
What's that sailing through the air in the boardroom? See them shiver. You can spend your life hoping for pie in the sky, but the baking brigade delivers. What's that sailing through the air in the boardroom? See them shiver. You can spend your life hoping for pie in the sky, but the baking brigade delivers.
They pied Willie Brown? Excellent!
What?
They pied Willie Brown. I haven't seen that since Wavy Gravy got Humphrey.